Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. It's a Stashin with Stephanie Day, and that means we've got a brand new back order friendly pattern to bring you, and it's been inspired by this month's Stashin with Stephanie collection that we just shipped out to all of our subscribers. It's called Dreamscape by Josephine Kimberling from FIGO Fabrics. FIGO is a modern division of Northcott Fabrics, which you may know a little better. It's super beautiful. It's very psychedelic, I think. It reminds me of vintage and its colorway and its wild designs, but I really love how it came together. We're going to be making a quilt this month called Galactic. We're going to be using 60-degree diamonds and triangles to create a no Y-seam star block that is a lot easier to go together than it looks, which is my favorite kind of quilt. I'm going to walk you through how to cut everything and how to get everything sewed together in a very kind of modular way so that everything looks great. The blocks are rather large, and we actually sewed them together in block halves that get joined once we're joining our vertical rows, which is how we avoid the dreaded Y-seam, because no one wants to do that. So we never have them in our patterns here at Quilt Addicts Anonymous, and it really makes for a really fun, fast quilt. Now, you can do this with any collection, but what I did was I used my lighter fabrics for my center diamonds and my darker medium ones for my outer smaller diamonds. And I actually have one extra fabric in the Dreamscape bundle that is actually needed for the pattern. So what I did is I took that extra fabric and I added it to my lap size large diamonds. That way there's 6 in each one, and I'm able to have a different diamond in each section, and it looks absolutely fabulous. So I love how mine turned out, and we're going to have a video on how we quilted this too. So we're going to take a peek at the fabric in just a second, but first I want to tell you about Stashin with Stephanie. It's a subscription club that we run here at Quilt Addicts Anonymous that allows you to save money on your fabric and have an idea of what to do with it every single month. So the initial bundle is $32.49 plus shipping, and that gets you 10 fat quarters. Right now the price of a fat quarter is about $380, $390 with inflation, and so that gets you about a 20% discount on your initial fat quarter bundle. And this is brand new, just released fabric that's come out. This is not bargain basement stuff. So it's what I think is the best line from that month that has come out of all the modern quilt designers out there. So I picked those, and I loved having that part be part of my job. So then here's the really fun part. So I take a look at the fabric and I let it percolate in my brain, and I let it tell me how it would like to live its best life. And I come up with a pattern that allows that fabric to really shine. So like this month, I have all the lighter fabrics in the center, and then we have the other fabrics going around it as the darker ones and medium ones as the smaller scale diamonds, and we're really able to show off those prints. It's really fun, but not all of them call for that. We might have something else where we want to have more of a modular design that's more geometric and not so pointy stars. And I let it talk to me and say, what do you want to become? And then I turn that into a pattern that is created specifically for that fabric. And then you get that pattern for free, which is another $12 value. And that's not it. You also get access to all the rest of the Stashin with Stephanie patterns that I have designed over the years. It's a lot. It is over probably a $300 or $400 value at this point, and you get access to all those PDFs for free at the second you join as a member. And you have access to that as long as you are a member. So new pattern every month, plus access to all the previous Stashin with Stephanie designs. And I've got 2 best-selling books, Fat Quarter Workshop and Fat Quarter Patchwork Quilts, that were originally Stashin with Stephanie designs, so you get special discounts on those books. So you can really bust that stash. If you're trying to use more of your stash this next year and save some money, you can make that happen. But the savings doesn't end there. You also get to save 20% on any additional fabric that you put out there. So for example, we just sent out 10 fat quarters to our members. That means they didn't get 5 fat quarters that were in the line. So we have what's called a finishing kit, which includes the 5 fat quarters they didn't receive, plus whatever we use for background and binding, and they can purchase that to turn their bundle into a full quilt kit. Save 20% on that, plus any additional fabric they would like to order that's been featured as a past Stashin' with Stephanie collection. That's not just for 1 month, that's for all time as long as we have the fabric in stock. So it is a really great way to sort of continue to quilt and love it and be able to stay on a budget. So if that's something you're looking to do, this is a good club to get a part of because you get all the patterns, you get discounts on the fabric that you buy as part of it, both the bundle and additional fabric if you want to do something with it. And you don't ever have to do the project that we come up with. You can pick from any of the ones that we've done previously. You can come up with your own thing. Maybe you've got a bucket list pattern that you think it would be great for. That's fine. Just go pick up some additional fabric, whatever you need. You can still save on it. And then you can show that off in our Facebook group that you get to be a part of once you join. So it's really fun. And I think you guys will really enjoy it, especially if you're trying to save some money, you love modern quilting fabric, and you like quilting. So we can continue that on in the next year. All right, we're going to take a look at this month's fabric, and then we're going to get started on our tutorial. So this is lovely. These are peony flowers, and you can see the little buds coming up ready to bloom, but they're in all kinds of wild colors. So this is a really fun one to have in your quilt, especially when it's cut up in all different places. You can still tell what it is, but it's just a really fun colorway. This is kind of where I feel like it gets a little psychedelic. The sun print with the stars and the lightning bolts is so fun, and the yellow really works with a lot of the other colors that are in there, as well as the pink and the teals. It's just a common theme throughout. Really gorgeous. To me, this print looks like a combination of like sea coral and crazy flowers and even a little bit of jaguar spots, which we're going to see a little bit later. There are a few prints that trend a little bit more brown, but it's a very modern brown. It doesn't look Civil War at all. This one is fun because it's all these geometric butterflies floating around, so it is really cute. But when you look at it from a distance, you don't see it. You kind of see it as you get closer in. This is one of the ones that I use for the big diamonds in the center of my star block, and I think it looks so cool with all of these curvy lines that get cut into a very sharp diamond. It just is a really cool juxtaposition. This one makes me think of abstract water. I love how it just kind of is rippling all over. This one to me looks like someone took watercolor and just dabbed everywhere, and I love how it looks, and it does a good job of coordinating all the colors in the collection. This confetti print is really fun too. I love that deeper teal background juxtaposed with a little bit of that mustard yellow and pink. It really goes very well together. This is what we're using for our binding, and it really is pretty. It's a nice little pastel with a lot of movement in it, so it is a nice little frame to our quilt. Here's that wavy ripple print again, this time in yellow. This is, I think, one of the more fun prints in the collection. There's a bunch of flowers growing, all different kinds, and it has all the colors that are in the collection, but you also see all these hands with these really cute sleeves that are kind of the prints that we see in other sections. Like you can see this is a print somewhere else, and we do see these leopard prints, and it really is a lot of fun. But when we're cutting this, we're not fussy cutting it. So you're gonna sometimes end up with hand, and sometimes you see it all. And it just, I think it's fun to see where it all lands when you're cutting this and having them be our little diamonds. This one is technically considered a basic that FIGO puts out that coordinates with all of their fabrics. So what you want to do is use these and have them in your collection. So when you have something that maybe is 14 fat quarters and you need 15, you're able to pull this and have it look really good and fill it out, and you'll have enough for the pattern, but it doesn't look like it's clashing. It looks like it all belongs. So that's why we included this one. Now this one here, we have sun and lightning bolts and all these tiny little stars in here with the fun rainbow, and it is really a fun print. I use this one for my center star as well. We have that confetti print again, this time with a brown background. Here's one of the prints that you could see in the sleeves of the hands. It is this really fun just splatter of color, and again, it does a really good job of including all the colors in the line. I chose to use this one as one of my large diamonds as well in the center of that star because I wanted to have the opportunity to include these jaguars in on a big scale. And I didn't fussy cut anything, they just kind of landed where they landed, but I have a couple where the jaguar looks like it is perfectly placed, and I love that when that kind of accidentally ends up where it should be, and it really looks very good on a large scale. All right, so that is Dreamscape from FIGO Fabrics. It is absolutely gorgeous, and I can't wait to show you what we're doing with it in the tutorial up next. So we start every tutorial that uses 60-degree diamonds and triangles with a lesson on cutting. The first thing you have to know is you need to have a ruler that has all 3 points. Now, some of them have a blunt tip at the top. The math is very different for that. You may not end up with enough diamonds if you use one like that. We recommend the Clearview triangle ruler. It's got that tip at the point at the top, and that's what you need in order to use any of our patterns that use 60-degree diamonds and triangles. And I personally hate it when you purchase a ruler for one pattern only and then never use it again. So if you like our patterns, we use this all the time. About every 3rd month or so, we come out with a new pattern that uses it. I'm planning a whole series to come out next spring or summer that is going to be using it. And we have a bunch of patterns that already exist that use this ruler. So if you take a look at any of our 60-degree diamond or triangle patterns and you like it, this is a good ruler to have in your stash. All right, so we're going to talk about how to cut our 60-degree diamonds first. Now, these instructions are going to work no matter what size strip you are working with. So some of them are going to work for bigger ones and some will work for smaller ones, but the lesson is still the same. So when you are cutting for your fat quarter strips, we're going to have just one strip and we're going to have it right side up. When we are cutting from our background, we're going to go ahead and have that so that it is our selvage edges are together, and we will cut both sides of that together just like you would if you were cutting squares from a width of fabric. But the way we cut them are the same. So we're going to start off by lining the bottom line up with the bottom of our ruler. Now I don't want to use the selvage edge, so we're going to move it over as far to the edge as we can. Now in this case, it's a 2 3/4 line. There's going to be different measurements depending on what size strip you're working with, so make sure you're referring to your pattern to know what size you need to work with for that particular section. But in this case, I want my 2 3/4, which is the width of my strip, even with the bottom, and the tip of my triangle ruler even with the top. So once I'm happy with that, I'm going to take my ruler or my rotary cutter and I'm just going to cut down the side. Sometimes when you have a pattern like this, you're going to need this. In this pattern, we don't, so we can just get rid of that and move it off to the side. I'm going to do the same thing with the strip above. This time, but remember, we've got our selvage edges together. No problem. We're going to cut it both of those together and that'll be just fine. Occasionally when you're doing something like this, you might have to unfold the strip. So just pay attention to your instructions. In this case, we don't. We're going to keep our selvage edges together, but always read the instructions because it might be a little different depending on how it works. You might need to get an odd triangle from that fold of fabric, or odd diamond rather. All right, so we've got everything started. Now we're going to cut our diamond. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip our ruler, rotate it 180 degrees. So that way the 2 3/4 inch is now going to be on the top of our strip and the point is going to be on the bottom. There's one other spot we have to pay attention to, and that is the left side of the ruler. We want that to be even right with the tip that we just cut off, and that's what's going to give us our 60-degree triangle. So once you have that even with the top edge, 2 3/4 with the top, and your point even with the bottom, then you can go ahead and cut up the right side. And again, we're going to do the same thing with our background strip. Just we're cutting 2 at a time since we have those selvage edges together. So here we can see that we ended up with 2. So that's quite nice. Now for the rest of these, you don't have to flip that ruler anymore. All you have to do is just slide it down, line it up the same way we did when we cut here, making sure we're even with the top of the point, the top of the strip, and the bottom here, and you can just keep cutting along down until you've cut all of your diamonds out. Next, we're going to talk about cutting a 60-degree triangle, which is also sometimes called an equilateral triangle. So it's the same process for this one. We're only going to be cutting it out of our background fabric, and it's the same steps whether you're doing the small or the large one. You just need to pay attention to what width it is so you can get the right line lined up for your ruler. We are going to take our ruler, and it starts out the exact same way. We are going to move it down. In this case, we've got our 3 inch at the bottom and our point at the top, and I'm going to cut off that selvage edge, and we're going to get rid of that corner. We don't need it. Now here's where it gets different. Instead of moving the ruler and rotating it, we're going to leave it in place so we can cut across the side to create our equilateral triangle. Now once you've done that, you can rotate your ruler 180 degrees and get everything lined up again. We're going to have our 3-inch at the top, and then this entire edge should be even with the left edge of the ruler, and then the point should be even here. Now I'm going to exaggerate this quite a bit, but what you don't want to do is have a gap between the bottom of where this cut edge is and where your triangle is. Obviously this is not where we would want to cut, it's quite obvious here. But let's say we did this and we had a little bit of an 1/8 of an inch gap there. One, you no longer have an equilateral triangle because you have changed your sides of everything. And two, this is going to mean that you have to ease in fabric, and that's when you get blocks that are a little wompy and maybe have a B or C cup in the center, which we don't want. We want nice flat blocks in the center, and that is the only way to get that is to cut right to start with. So just make sure that you've lined up here and that you don't have a flat tip at all at the tip here. And again, this is why it's really important to use that Clearview triangle ruler or one like it that has the tip on all the sides, especially that top, because that gives you the correct math so that you don't have to do it and everything will turn out the right size. All right, I'm just going to cut along here. Now you would just keep rotating your ruler until you made it all the way down your strip. And remember, because we have cut this with our selvage edges together, we have cut 4 of them, even though we only had to cut 2 triangles. So it works out pretty well and you're able to go through it fairly quickly. So now we're going to start assembling our block, and you are going to create a piece diamond and 2 wedges that will eventually become a larger wedge that goes together in your block. So we're going to do this in sections to break it down, make it nice and easy. This is how I did mine. It makes it really easy to work for a couple hours, then take a break and come back and do another section of the quilt. So to do our piece diamond, what we're going to do is we're going to sew these guys together and then add on our third, and then we'll join our pieces here, which will attach to our larger diamond, and then we'll have a row that gets attached. Now, if you have never sewn with diamonds or triangles before, this part might be a little weird, and I'm going to show you some tips and tricks to make sure that everything gets lined up the way it's supposed to. Now, the temptation when you first sew this is to just flip it right sides together and line up that point of the diamond with the point here. Now, if you do that, you are going to end up with a piece that when you fold it is way off. That's no good. What we want to do is actually have kind of an offset where our points are poking out a little bit. And that is going to allow us to sew our 1/4 inch seam so that it is essentially going where the 1/4 inch seam meets right where this valley is and on the other side as well. Now, if you've never done this before, you might want to mark the first couple that you do until you get the hang of it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take my ruler and I'm going to line that 1/4 inch line up with the tip of my diamond. And I'm just going to put a little mark in there so I have a nice guide of where everything should line up. So now I can put that on there and I can see that my lines are coming up pretty good. I've got my little hash mark here at a 1/4 inch, right where the valley is, and it's lining up here as well. So that's looking really good. You can pin that or you can just go ahead and sew it. Again, you don't have to mark it forever. I've done about a bajillion of these. I have not marked them in a very, very long time. I can eyeball it at this point. And a really good way to know that you've done it is your needle should be coming in right here and ending right there where that little valley is. And then you know you've done it right. If it's not and it's pretty far off, then you know that maybe I should take a look at that and see what's going on. But if we do it this way, once it gets pressed open, everything is going to line up. All right, so I'm getting started sewing, and again, that needle is coming in right where that little valley is. And if you need to adjust as you come down here, that's totally fine. I just kind of go slow at this step. All right, and I'm coming right out where that valley is. Everything is looking good. I'm going to go ahead and join these while I am at it. I'm just going to flip these guys right sides together, line them up as I put them under my presser foot to chain piece. Now, I am a really big fan of pressing your seams open, but I feel like it's absolutely critical whenever you're doing anything with 60-degree diamonds or triangles, because it makes those points so flat, which makes it really easy to join everything together and also quilt it when you're all done. So to press it flat, what I do is I open up that seam allowance first with my fingertips, and then I kind of finger press it open. And then I just take my iron and put the tip right down the center of that seam. Go all the way down. You can see I've got a nice straight line here, which is exactly what we want. That's why we offset everything just a little bit. And I'm going to hit it from the right side as well. That's going to help everything lay nice and flat. Do the same thing on the other side. All right, so now you can see how this is kind of going together. We're going to be able to join this piece to here to finish up what is essentially our top row, and join this piece to here to finish up what is essentially our bottom row. The biggest thing to get used to when you're doing this is knowing that your points are going to be pointing in the opposite direction, and they're supposed to whenever you're putting something together, because then when we press it open, you can see it goes in the right direction. So that's what we want it to look like. And again, if you need to mark those 1/4 inch seams while you're getting used to it, feel free. All right, we're going to give those both a press. When you start to work where you already have a seam pressed open, it sometimes is helpful to lift your iron and then set it down. That way you don't accidentally press one of these seams in the wrong direction. Now, I have made approximately a bajillion diamonds and triangle quilts and sewn together, but I mark this every single time. What we want to have happen is have these points match perfectly. The only way to do that and ensure you've got it right on top of each other is to mark a 1/4 inch in here and here, and then you can match those points from the back. So I'm going to flip them over first so I can see where everything is supposed to be. Then I'm going to take my friction gel pen, which will go away with heat, and I'm just going to mark that. And I'm doing it darker than I normally would. You just need to see where it's at when you're doing it at home, but I want you guys to be able to see it home, and it's busy fabric. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now, this pinning is a 2-step process. We're going to flip everything back over right side up here. I'm going to take one pin and I'm going to go through the seam right where I marked it, which is right here. And then I'm going to find that same spot on the other side. I kind of eyeball it to start, and then I flip it over to see how good I did. In this case, I did pretty good. I'm right in the middle of the seam and also right in the middle of the mark. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to arrange these so that my edges are nice and straight. And notice that that doesn't mean that they're always exactly even. There may be some subtle variations in how you sewed your diamonds together. So like in this case, the bottom fabric is sticking out a little more than the top fabric. That's okay. As long as we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam, what's important is that those points where the seams are that are exactly a 1/4 inch away from the edge, that those are right on top of each other, because that's going to make for a really fabulous join and a pointy point where all your points are coming together. That's what we want. Now, I don't pin with this pin, because if I were to rock this pin and stick it in, my top fabric would go forward a little, my bottom fabric would go back, and my points would no longer be on top of each other. So what I do is I take a second pin and pinching this so that it's going straight through between my thumb and forefinger. I take that second pin in my other hand and I pin across, and then I can remove that original pin, and this is what's going to hold everything together until I sew. So when I'm stitching this, what I do is I'll get started and then I aim for my mark, so that way I know I'm getting right where it's at the 1/4 inch and where I pin to get everything on top. And 9 times out of 10, probably 99 times out of 100, I'm really happy with where everything turned out. And the good news is this is really busy fabric, so if they aren't all perfect, it's going to be fine. People aren't going to notice it, especially once it's been quilted and washed, but it's a really fun technique to learn and get down. All right, so I'm getting started again right in that little valley, and I'm going to go ahead and just sew originally, because this is the large diamond here. So even though I have a seam, I just need to make sure that everything is nice and lined up and we're good to go. So I zoom along and I slow down as I'm approaching that second seam. This is where I've got my pin, where we wanted to really keep those on top of. Now the biggest mistake people make is pulling their pin out too soon, because I sew almost right up to that pin. You don't want to sew over it because that can break your needle, but I'm like 1 needle width behind where that pin is, because now that I've got my needle down, it's acting like a pin, so I can pull this out without worrying about all the time we took to get everything just where it needed to be, of losing that. That would be no good. So wait as long as you can to pull those pins out. Now what I do, because I don't pin everything else, is I just line up my bottom corners here so I can see my valley is about 1/4 inch away from the edge, which is what I want. So I can just put my finger there and sew down the rest of the way. Now we're going to go ahead and press that seam open again. Again, you want to lift and press. We've got a lot of seams at this point. We don't want to flip something going the wrong way. So just take your time here. And I'm going to do it from both sides. Now, like I said, this is a really busy fabric. So if your point isn't right on, probably nobody's going to notice, as long as it's not way, way off. But this is about as good as it gets. That point is meeting both here on my sides, but also from point to point here, which is exactly what we want to have happen. And everything is laying super flat because we took our time to press the seams open. So you really get to appreciate all those points, because sometimes when you press things under, you lose a little bit of it. It just doesn't look as sharp. So I love doing this, and I will be quilting right through these points as I am stitching everything together, and there will not be any problems doing that. I do stitch at a 2.0 stitch length, but that is about the only modification I make, and I've never had a problem pressing seams open. All right, we're going to move on to our wedges. So we're going to make 2 wedges. They're going to be on the opposite sides of the diamond block that we just created, and essentially we have to lay them out in mirror image in order for it to work out just right. So you're going to want to lay them out like this. We also have a layout diagram in the pattern that goes with this. Again, it's called Galactic, and you can get it on our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. But make sure you lay it out like this. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to sew together our diamonds and our triangle, and on both sides, and then we're going to be able to join it to our large one. So we're kind of creating a row here that'll be the bottom of our triangle or the side, and then we're able to join it to our larger piece. Now, sewing these 2 together is the exact same as the other diamonds, so I'm not going to cover that in great detail, but I am going to come back to show you how to add on this triangle. I know it looks like it's bigger, but trust me, the math works, and how to add on this as well. So the biggest thing is to make sure that you have everything laid out right, and that you are having these going in the correct direction, so that way everything shows up correctly and is nice and straight where it needs to be. So what I did was I made like all my wedge A's at one point and then all my wedge B's, so that way I didn't get things mixed up and I had the right amount of everything. But for this video, I'm just going to go ahead and do them both at the same time to save a little bit of time. All right, now this process is the same no matter which direction everything is going. But essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to flip it right sides together, and we're going to match up these top 2 points. We want those to be right on top of each other. And when you do that, that's when we see the little V down here, just like we've been doing all along, where we end up with that dog ear kind of hanging off. That's exactly what we want, because we can come in, we can start sewing our 1/4 inch seam here, and when we end, our 1/4 inch seam is going to come out right at that little V or valley, and we're going to be able to sew right along that and have it work out perfectly. So I'm going to do that for both sides, and then press, and then we're ready to add our large triangle. So it goes really fast. This is not a hard block. There's not a lot of steps. You just kind of have to pay attention to where things belong and get that down of knowing that things are going to kind of go in the opposite direction, and that you kind of want to aim for that V. So this next part, again, is going to be the same no matter which side you're doing. What we're going to do is we're going to flip our triangle right sides together, and this is why I like to leave those dog ears on, because we're able to line up the point of our triangle with the dog ear that's left from that seam being pressed open. And also, you'll see we have our nice little convenient V to let us know where our 1/4 inch seam should start and stop. So we're going to go ahead and stitch those through, and then our wedges are done. All right, so we got our wedge A and our wedge B completed. Now we're ready to add that onto the piece diamond that we made earlier. You can see how it matters where we put these pieces so that our large triangle looks well when we're putting everything together. Now, this is another instance where I'm going to mark my 1/4 inch seam here and here. And honestly, when I was putting everything together, I did just mark the outside and then I kind of eyeballed it from there. But if you feel like you need to mark both of these seams, go ahead and do it. Now, what we're going to do is we're only going to sew one side on at a time because we have to press the seam before we add on this one, because the tip of that is going to get caught in when we add on our other wedge. So I'm going to start with this one. I'm just going to flip it over and I'm going to mark that seam, that 1/4 inch. Again, I'm paying attention to where it is right, going over that seam allowance because we want that to be lining up perfectly with right here. Now I can lay those right sides together. We're going to put a pin through where I marked, and then I'm going to eyeball about a 1/4 inch away from the edge, and again go straight through where those seams are coming together. And at this point, I'm kind of just making sure that I've eyeballed that correctly. I actually need to come down just a smidge. My edges are not lining up quite the way I want them to. That's much better. My edges are nice and lined up, and I've got that pin going straight through those seams, so I should be good to go ahead and do my second pin now. And now I'm ready to stitch this seam. Now again, I've done so many of these that I'm not going to mark my 1/4 inch here or here because I'm just going to look for the valley of where these guys come together. And that's where I'm going to aim for, and making sure that's about a 1/4 inch away to get my needle come out right here. Now on this side, our points are going to be right on top of each other. So you don't really have to worry about that too much, besides making sure they're on top of each other when you start your seam. But if you need to mark, if you need to pin a lot more than this, that's fine. This is just where I'm comfortable at after doing this for years and years and years on probably dozens and dozens of quilts. So you'll get there too if you're not there now, and just mark and do what you're comfortable with for now. All right, I'm pressing this seam open too. I'm pressing every seam in the quilt open. I love it in general, but it's especially satisfying results when you do it, when you have 60-degree diamonds and really any triangles. Just be really careful that you're not pressing any of those other seams in the opposite direction. So it's a lot of lifting and pressing at this step. I'm also going to go ahead and go over it from the right side. And now we're ready to repeat on the other side. Again, I'm going to mark here. Anytime I have these two coming together, I don't eyeball it, I mark it, even though I've done so many of these. I need that mark in order to make sure that my points come together like this and have a really fantastic join. And also when we flip it together, it's just going to be like when we added this triangle on. The point here is going to line up with our dog ear here, and then this point is going to come about a 1/4 inch beyond here. Now, even though I have really flat seams at this point because I pressed everything open, they can get flatter. So I'm going to take my spray mister. I don't like putting water in my iron because every iron I've done that to is gunked up and gotten gross. So I'm just going to deliver a fine mist over top of it. It's a lot better in a spray bottle because you don't ever get those water droplets, and it is a good replacement for steam. And I'm just going to go over first those really big seams and just get everything nice and flat before I join this with my wedges. So at this point is when we're going to make our half block. Now we are not going to make a whole block because that would require a Y seam. We want to avoid those. So we are just going to stop once we get it at a half, and then you can go lay it out on your bed or a design wall or a floor that's open and decide where you want all your halves. And then you're able to sew those together in vertical rows, and it goes pretty quickly. I got mine together in about an hour last night. It was so fast. So at this point, we don't have to do any of those special markings anymore because we're able to use our seams as a guide because they're going to be going in the same direction. So all we have to do is line up our seams on top of each other and then pin in the right side of the seam allowance. Now, just like when we were attaching our wedges to the side of our diamond, we only can do one side at a time. Then we have to press because this seam is going to cross over. Now, I mentioned this at the beginning, but there's one extra fat quarter in the kit and the bundle if you get a finishing kit this month, because I wanted to be able to have each one of these 6 diamonds be a different fabric. And so that way you can just cut some extra from there. Everything will look fantastic and lovely, and it'll be super exciting, and you won't have any repeats because nobody likes that. That's no fun. But there are enough to where you can have a different fabric for each one of these 6 large diamonds. All right, I'm going to start with this one. We're just going to flip everything right sides together, and I'm going to turn the side I need to pin so that it is facing away from me. I find that's always easier. So now at this point, I'm just looking to make sure that I'm lining those seam allowances right on top of each other like this, and that I've got my edges even. That's really it. And I'm going to work my way down doing that until I make my way through all the seams. Now I'm just going to go ahead and stitch my 1/4 inch seam from edge to edge. Now, just like when we were pinning those diamond points together, I want to sew as close to that pin as possible. So I've got my needle down fully in that first half of that seam allowance, so that way it can kind of act like a pin and hold all those seam edges together so that it looks fantastic when we have it done. I'm going to repeat that all the way down for each seam. We're going to press this seam open as well, and I always like to start on that large diamond end because you have a little bit to work until you end up with all those seams. I am really lifting and pressing here, so that way I'm not pressing any of these seams going the wrong way. At this point too, I'm also going to take my spray mister and hit the seam I just sewed so that I can go over it from the front side and get it super, super flat. And those joins are fantastic. Every single one of them is meeting perfectly, so that turned out really good. I'm very happy with these results. I'm going to do everything again, joining the left side of the wedge to the center. This time my points up here are going to match, and the point down here is going to match with your dog ear that is poking out when you press your seam open. And again, you want to match up all of those seams as well, just lining them right on top of each other. All right, so we have got our block half together. Again, this is where you're gonna stop. You're not gonna join these into hexagons because that creates a Y seam. They're very, very bad. You don't wanna know what they are. So I'm gonna go grab though another block so I can show you how to join it into a vertical row, because again, it's just a little weird because things are going in opposite directions. It looks a little strange, but when it all gets pressed open, it's a nice straight row. So I'm gonna go grab that, and I'll show you how to do that, and then you know everything you need to know in order to get this quilt together. All right, I want to point out to you guys, these are your wedge C's. So you're going to leave a few of them to the side when you are making your larger block halves. The reason for that is they're going to go at the top and the bottom of your vertical rows. That way you don't have big white space. You're going to have some piece block, and then you're going to slice that when everything is done. Make sure you're referring to your pattern diagram. It shows it really clearly in there for you. Not a big deal. You'll be able to figure it out. But what I wanted to show you was how these block halves go together. You can see if I put everything here that we end up with our complete block. My camera is not high enough to show you the whole thing because it's a very big star. But this would create Y seams at the edge. No fun. We're going to avoid that. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to sew it together as the half into vertical rows, and then the blocks finally get joined when you join your vertical rows. But when you put it together, it's weird because just like when we're putting together our little diamonds, they go in opposite directions. So you just kind of have to get used to that and know it, and then you'll be fine. One other really great thing is we don't need to mark our 1/4 inch seams on this either in order to make sure our points come together, because every single one of these is going to have a sort of triangle at the tip, either from our fat 1/4 diamonds or our background diamonds. And so all you have to do is put your needle through where each of those tips are, and you'll be able to get them matched up perfectly. I'm going to show you how that works, and then we'll zoom in for the pinning part. So first we're going to put this so that our right edges are together, and you can see that it's going in opposite directions, but I'm going to rotate a little bit so it's even more obvious. So you can see when these guys are right sides together that we have one block going off to the left and the other block going off to the right. But you can also see that when it gets sewn together, that's going to be a nice straight line. It's just weird to get used to if you haven't done it before. Now I'm going to zoom in for the pinning part. We're going to start with our center diamond because it's really easy to see, because you can see where all these seams are coming together and make that tip. And that's another great reason to press your seams open, because it's really easy to see that. You might not see it if it was pressed to the side. So I'm just going to put my pin right at the tip of all of that. And then I'm also going to put my pin right at the tip of the diamond below it. So now it's going through right at the tip, and it's going straight perpendicular through. Now it's important to know that sometimes these edges are not going to be exactly even. In this case, my bottom wedge is sticking out a little bit more than this one. But what's important is that your points are on top of each other. If you have a little bit of variation within the seam allowance, that's not going to be super visible or affect the finished flatness of your quilt, as long as it's a small amount. But it certainly will be able to tell if your points didn't line up. So we're going to do that double pinning technique again and be able to remove the pin. Then I'm going to repeat with the other ones. It's just not as obvious on camera because we are going through white background to white background, but the process is the same. And when you reach those edges, again, the point is going to meet up with your dog ear, and you're going to be coming right out where that valley is. So now we're going to stitch along this edge, again matching those dog ears and points up and sewing as close to those pins as we can get. One other thing that you want to kind of keep in mind is you want to sew just one needle width to the right of where those points are. That way you don't cut them off, because if you sew right on top of the point or on this side of it, then that's when you start losing points and they don't meet together as perfectly as you would like. All right, we're going to go ahead and press those seams open. Again, we have a lot of seams, so make sure you are really lifting and pressing. Don't drag that iron down, and you'll be really happy with the results. When I press on the other side, I'm going to go ahead and hit that with the spray mister. That way I can get a really flat seam here. I'm really happy with these seam joins. Those points really came together absolutely perfectly. They are just like kissing right there, and they're super pointy. And that's because we took our time. We pinned with the 2 pins, making sure that our points were right on top of each other, and we pressed it open. That wouldn't necessarily be the case if I had flipped it this way and pressed everything under. Then we might have lost one of the points. This one might have kind of gotten sucked under, and it just doesn't work out quite as well as you hope it would. So from here, you're just going to join your vertical rows, and you're going to slice off your top and bottom to square that up, and you are good to go. One other thing you might want to consider doing is sewing an 1/8 of an inch stay stitch around the edge of your entire quilt. There's a lot of bias in this quilt, and bias doesn't need to be a dirty word, but you do need to treat it with respect. So by sewing that 1/8 of an inch stay stitch, it's like when you sew a stay stitch around the neckline of a garment. It allows everything to kind of keep its shape when it's waiting to be quilted and hanging on a hanger, and then also when it's loaded on the long arm, so that way everything is nice and square when you're all done. Well, thanks so much for joining me for the tutorial for Galactic. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope you're inspired to go give 60-degree diamonds and triangles a try now that we have taken the fear out of it and shown you how it works and the little weirdness of it, but how it absolutely looks fantastic when it is all done. Again, the pattern is called Galactic. You can get it over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. We do have quilt kits available while supplies last. And if you would like to join Stashin with Stephanie, not only are you going to get bundles every single month, but you also, once you sign up on your second purchase, our website will know you're a member. You'll be able to get the pattern for free. You'll be able to get a 20% discount on your quilt kit, and you will be good to go. One other thing I should mention, because people miss it all the time, even though we have it in our product description and in the emails we send you afterwards, if you sign up by the end of the month, so it's November, if you sign up by the end of November, then you will get your first bundle shipped to you around the 22nd of December. If you wait until December 1st to sign up, then you're going to be waiting until January 22nd to get that first bundle notification. That's because we have a lot of members in this club. There are about 700 right about now. And it takes a long time because we have to then cut 7,000 fat quarters from 2 pallets worth of fabric and get them folded and bundled and shipped to you guys. And I've got to design the pattern. And we do sometimes sell out of the fabric. So we want to make sure that everyone has the same opportunity to get those finishing kits so they can turn their bundle into a full quilt kit and additional fabric if they really like it and they just want to do something special with it, like get backing fabric to match or borders or something else that they have in mind that is different than our program. So check it out. Stashin with Stephanie, great way to save on fabric in the new year. Great way to work through that stash too, because you get access to all those fat quarter friendly patterns right away as soon as you join. So while you're waiting for that first bundle, you can do that. You can check out a previous quilt kit that we have done for Stashin with Stephanie and save some money on that. It is up to you. You can keep yourself busy while you're waiting for that first bundle. All right, well, that is it for this day's tutorial. I hope you guys like Galactic, and until next time, happy quilting.